Ladies and gentlemen, draga braćo i sestre, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. I am president of Serbian American Leadership Conference, Aleksandar Djuricic. We are participating and continuing in our leadership series that we have started during this COVID-19 period. Today, we are joined by a phenomenal guest, someone who I long admire for his success, for his drive, and I'm just very honored to have him with us. His Excellency, Mr. Vuk Jeremić. His Excellency, Mr. Vuk Jeremić was born in Belgrade, Serbia in 1975. As a teenager, Mr. Jeremić and his family moved from Belgrade to the United Kingdom, where he completed his high school education in London. Later, Mr. Jeremić earned a bachelor's degree in theoretical and experimental physics from Cambridge University in 1998, and then a master's degree in public administration and international development from Harvard University in 2003. From 2007 to 2012, Mr. Jeremić served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Serbia. Later that year, Mr. Jeremić was elected to be the president of the 67th session of the United Nations General Assembly. In 2013, Mr. Jeremić founded and is the president of the Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development. In 2016, Mr. Jeremić participated in the official election for UN Secretary-General, which we'll get into. And in 2017, Mr. Jeremić ran as a presidential candidate of Serbia and later formed the Narodna Stranka, in English, the People's Party, one of the most formidable opposition parties in Serbia today. Mr. Jeremić, thank you for joining us. It is an honor to have you with SALC today.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a great honor to be with you and to be able to talk to many of our brothers and sisters throughout the world.
Absolutely. I think you're one of the few Serbs in the world that doesn't need much of an introduction. I think regardless of a Serb or anywhere you're at in the world, China, South America, North America, I think you are one of the few Serbs that everybody knows. So it's really an honor to have you with us. And before we get to the questions, I just wanted to say that Dr. Sanda Rašković-Ivić was actually supposed to be with us today. And unfortunately, due to a health emergency in her family, she's not able to join us. We wish her and her family the best. They're in our prayers. Dr. Rašković-Ivić's father, Dr. Jovan Rašković, as Mr. Jeremić knows, I'd mentioned to him before, he is one of my political idols, someone I aspire to become one day. So we're sad to hear about the situation in her family, and we hope that everybody gets well soon. So Mr. Jeremić, as we kind of jump into this conversation, obviously the topic of our day is certainly the COVID-19 pandemic. So most of these discussions these days tend to begin with the impact of COVID-19 on our lives. How have you and your family been dealing with the unprecedented changes, and how has it impacted your personal and professional life?
Well, once again, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm joining you today from Serbian heartland, from Šumadija. I'm right now sitting in my village where my father and my grandfather and my grand-grandfather are from. It's a village called Ježevica. It's in the neighborhood of Čačak. This is the house where my great-grandfather was born. So I'm here in a very particular surrounding. And it doesn't, everything looks very same. One could be able to say that there's like a COVID-19 global emergency outside this village. Obviously, if you're in America in an urban center, be it New York or Chicago or other big cities, you're much more aware of the fact that things have changed. But here in the heart of Šumadija, things seem to be the same, but things are not the same. And in my opinion, that very few things on a global level will remain the same. Now, when it comes to our lives, nobody is like an isolated individual. Yeah, you may live here in the village, but your life is going to be impacted by what is going on. When it comes to my family, we've gone through some very difficult weeks during the COVID crisis because, unfortunately, both I and my family, we all got infected. Thank God, there were no fatalities in the family, but we've gone through some difficult moments, myself included. But now this is behind us. This is, if you ask me, how we went personally through this. But I've spent a lot of time thinking during this crisis, and I was privileged to be able to talk to quite a number of smart people around the world, who I called, who I interviewed for the think tank that I'm also running. This think tank is probably one of the most prominent think tanks in Southeast Europe. It's called Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development. So I started this series of, we call them Corona dialogues, talking to people from around the world, just like what you're doing, as a matter of fact. Like, what is going to be the impact on our life? What is going to be the impact on the planet? And I'm sure we can go into more details. But the one, I'd say, overarching thought that I'm happy to volunteer for the sake of this conversation is that there's going to be a great quickening, the quickening of pretty much everything.
Correct.
That was taking, I don't know, its course. The world is developing and things are developing, evolving, progressing. And certain things, I'd say some strategic things that would take, say, a decade to come into existence. I think that now they're going to happen in about a year or maximum 2 years from now. So if there's one word that I would use to describe the effect of the COVID-19 crisis, that one word would be the quickening.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be an incredibly... I did a video recently for my commencement speech, and in that speech I talked about the fact that this is likely going to be the most disruptive period. We were already entering the 21st century as the age of disruption, and I think this has now even thrown a larger wrench into that disruption, unfortunately. But there could be some great things that come out of it with technology. As I mentioned in the introduction, you studied at the University of Cambridge, where you earned your bachelor's degree in theoretical and experimental physics. So I'm curious, because a degree in theoretical physics in most cases doesn't lead to a political career. So did you envision a future in politics and public policy growing up, or was there a certain event or combination of events that led to your interest?
Very good question. I'm not a first physicist that decided to join public service. There are some scientists in politics, but I must admit that at the time when I applied to Cambridge to study theoretical physics, I applied because I thought that I was going to be a great physicist. I had dreamt of myself as a great physicist. I was very successful in high school in physics. So I thought, like, oh my God, I'm gonna apply to study physics in one of the best places in the world, and Cambridge believes, most of us who graduated from Cambridge, we claim that Cambridge is the best place in the world to study physics. But actually, when I came to Cambridge and when I started, that's when I met the people who were really going to become the real physicist. So the first, honestly, one of my closest friends, and in a way a roommate, because we were sharing the hall, with the residence hall. His name is Demis Hassabis. He's the founder of DeepMind, Google DeepMind. Wow. He now runs Demis Hassabis is one of my very close friends from college. We studied together. And when you come to a place where you start sharing your life and spending time with Demis, that's when you understand that you're not really going to be a great scientist, because there are some people who are so much more talented than you are, who are endowed with far more intelligence than yourself. And I managed to graduate. I think it was a great achievement that I managed to
Absolutely.
graduate, because there were certain times, honestly, especially in my first year and my second year, where I thought like, I'm never going to be able to graduate this. It's far too difficult. But I managed to graduate somehow. But the most important thing that I brought, like the biggest piece of experience and knowledge that I brought with me from Cambridge, which served me very well in the political career down the road. I learned that I'm not the smartest person in the world. And
Very humble.
trust me, in the field of politics, not everybody is aware of the simple fact of life. So I learned early on that there are people who are so much smarter than me. Then even to this day, I'm trying to surround myself with the people who are better and more talented in certain areas. And this is something that I don't really have a problem with, because I learned early on that there are some guys who are just like so way above you, and that you got to be humble about that. But he also asked me, how did I move to politics from physics?
Yeah.
There was an interim period after I graduated from Cambridge with my degree in theoretical physics. I entered a PhD program in applied math. So I was doing my PhD in math at the Imperial College, University of London.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent about 3 years doing this PhD in math. But then came the big trauma of 1999, NATO intervention.
Yep.
In the then Yugoslavia. And that really disturbed me to a great extent. I really felt very desperate. I was living in London. It wasn't an easy time to live in the West for somebody who comes from Serbia. And after this thing ended, I decided that something's got to change, that there has to be an end to what we had back then in Serbia, which was essentially a very brutal dictatorship.
I agree.
That isolated Serbia from the rest of the world to the extent that we ended up being bombed,
right,
and devastated as a country. So after the bombing, I decided to go back to Serbia and to try and do something about it. So I asked my thesis advisor from Imperial College to give me 6 months off to go back to Serbia to try and help someone do something.
Yeah.
So I ended up being amongst the people who founded Otpor, the resistance.
That's right.
That ended up being that ended up being amongst the instrumental entities that led to the democratic change that took place in Serbia in the year 2000. So that was the moment that changed my life, because this democratic change in Serbia pushed me into the direction of continuing to do something for the country. So I asked for additional 6 months, and for additional 6 months of absence from my PhD thesis, to which I never returned. So I'm not the doctor of science, unfortunately, although I was close to getting that degree. And that's when I decided that I want to devote my life to public service. So the 1999 bombing was the thing that changed, because I went from physics to math to doing something else.
Right. I think that's incredibly honorable and admirable. That's part of the reason that I'm interested in SALC and doing this, because I think there are some ideas and some values that are above others. And I think family and your country are two incredibly important things to fight for and try to leave as a legacy. And to this day, you're still fighting for those values that you believe in. And so kind of in this intermediate period of the politics, I mentioned, you were Minister of Foreign Affairs. I'm curious, what were the circumstances that led to your appointment? You went from Otpor to, at the age of 32, you served as Serbia's Minister of Affairs, which is, mind-boggling that someone at that age could become so successful so quickly and do something to help their country. So what were the circumstances that led to your appointment, and how was that experience?
Well, before I came to the point where I was in a position to be considered for the post of foreign minister and to be appointed, there was an interim period, because after I decided that I want to go for public service, and that I essentially needed some kind of education for that, because my previous education was physics and math. I spent 2 years at Harvard University at the Kennedy School of Government. And after I graduated from Harvard, I was invited to join the team of the then Defense Minister Boris Tadić, who later on became president of Serbia. So I moved with him from the Ministry of Defense to the presidency of Serbia. And then, one thing led to another. And in the year 2007, there was a very, I would say, critical election in Serbia, after which a coalition government was formed, and Mr. Tadić's party became part of the coalition. Mr. Tadić was the leader of the party at that time. So he had a key role in making appointments in that government. So I'm going to be, again, very honest. How did I end up being foreign minister? Nobody else wanted the job at that time. I kid you not. It was the year 2007, and the writings were on the wall, and everybody knew at that time that Kosovo was likely to declare independence soon. And everybody knew at that time that Serbia wasn't in the position to act militarily to respond to such a grave violation of our constitution, our sovereignty and territorial integrity. And everybody knew that it was the diplomacy that was going to be in the forefront of Serbia's, what they believed at the time, a futile act to defend itself. So basically, nobody wanted to be the foreign minister at that time, because everybody thought that, whoever was going to get into that job was going to burn. It's not going to last very long, and there'll be a time after to replace that burnt person, if you will.
Right.
So when I'm not even going to say offered, when I was told that this was going to be me,
Right.
I must admit that, of course I was excited, and it was a very big thing in my life, but I wasn't the happiest person in the world. because the conventional wisdom would have suggested back then that whoever took that position would be burned for a very, very long time and not last for a very long time in office. And then somehow it didn't happen, and perhaps it was luck, and perhaps it was act of God, and I helped that to a certain extent by trying to do my best at that time, but I didn't end up burning out, at least not then.
Right.
And I stayed in office for about 5.5 years. Those were amongst the most amazing years of my life, when I really felt like I was making a contribution, a significant contribution to the best of my ability, of course, at a moment when it wasn't very easy to be at the helm of Serbian diplomacy.
That's right. Not many victories. I think, it's funny hearing you say, the potential was burnt out, but for you, actually, it was the complete opposite. You had managed to take what turned into what was a difficult, a very precarious position. We didn't have, I think, the 2000s. It was very difficult to have any victories coming out of the 90s, unfortunately. And you managed to springboard yourself in 2012 to become elected as the president of the 67th session of the UN General Assembly. And then after that, you become second in voting for the UN Secretary-General to now current UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. So, can you tell us about that? How did you manage to get away from being burnt out to reaching a position that I think most Serbs cannot even comprehend the magnitude of that, UN Secretary-General, what that would mean, what that would have meant for not only you, but for our people in general?
Well, between 2007 and 2012, when I was Serbian foreign minister, Kosovo, of course, was absolutely the main topic. I mean, Kosovo remains one of the main topics for the Serbian diplomacy even today. But back then, don't forget, back then, in 2008, when Kosovo declared independence, that was also the priority for American diplomacy and for European diplomacies and for the Russian diplomacy, which is right now not the case. I was thrown into the league. I was literally thrown into the league. It wasn't that like I made myself into that league. I happened to be there, where Secretary of State of the U.S., where foreign ministers of European countries, they were all discussing Kosovo as one of the main topics. Today, this is no longer the case. And therefore, I really made myself at that time known to all of them, because that was the priority of their diplomacies. And our only hope to relativize the success of Kosovo's declaration of independence, that came from the fact that some of the major world countries recognized them right away.
Right.
US, UK, Germany, France, a lot of important countries recognized them right away. So the only way to relativize that success was to broaden the scope and actually broaden it to the whole world. So I traveled to close to 100 countries around the world, asking them not to recognize Kosovo as the independent state. And had I not expanded this terrain to the whole of the world, the issue would have been kept in the hallways of just the major countries.
Right.
It wasn't I only. I worked on behalf of the government. But our strategy was to say, let's get the whole world involved. Because if you get the whole world involved, there are going to be quite a number of countries. They're going to say, hang on a second. This doesn't sound like a good idea, because if they do this thing to Serbia today, tomorrow, somebody can do the same thing to us.
Correct.
a place like Nepal or a place like Lesotho or a place like Bolivia. I'm picking these countries because I traveled to them and to many others. Wouldn't necessarily jump on the issue of Kosovo to say, oh, now we're going to take a position on it. I traveled there to push them into taking a position on it because we needed, it's a wrong thing to say I was the one doing it on behalf of the government.
Right.
Yeah, but we needed the support of as many nations in the world as possible. That's why I traveled the whole world. The Economist wrote the article at that time, Serbian diplomacy on steroids, because we were like incessantly traveling around the world, explaining to people like our position and asking for their support. Why am I saying all this? At the time when I became Serbia's candidate to be president of the UN General Assembly, and the election for the UN General Assembly is a secret ballot of 193 countries. There are 193 member states of the UN. And one country, one vote is the system, a secret ballot. So when my name get onto the ticket, almost everybody in the 193 block knew me.
Right.
Because of my running around the world as a part of Kosovo-related diplomacy.
Yeah.
Okay. So those 193 countries knew me because of my work. And some people loved me and some people didn't, to be very honest. It was a close election, but I won. It was 99-85, and I became president of the UN General Assembly. I served for 1 year because it's a 1-year term,
right.
President of the General Assembly. And the way in which Serbia presided that year over the UN led us into a situation where it was a reasonable proposition to put forward a candidacy for the position of the UN Secretary-General 4 years down the road. That took place in 2016. That was an even tougher race than the race for the President of the General Assembly. It was a fascinating race. I really learned a lot about how the world functions, much more than everything that I've known until that point. So it was a phenomenal experience. It wasn't a one round of voting. It was 6 rounds of voting, 6 rounds of eliminatory voting. And in the last final, it was 6th round of voting. It was essentially myself running against the Secretary-General of this moment, Antonio Guterres, a very honorable man, a very experienced man, a very mild man. This is someone who I really admire. I learned a lot from him as well during that race. But the epic thing was this last round of voting when he was the oldest candidate in history, and I was the youngest candidate in history. And he won. And I think that he's done since then a very good job.
I don't think
Secretary-General.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's been easy for him at all. But I remember that period, and everyone was kind of really, I know in the Serbian American community, everyone was rooting for you at that time, and that they hoped that you would come out. And I think all the signs were pointing because the Eastern European group hadn't had a Secretary General, and so the idea was, the Eastern European group was going to be the one that was going to have this opportunity this time. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, it didn't work out. But
you know what? Like it was the moment. But one moment, there was one moment before the last round of voting, where things seemed, in the last round of voting, Guterres came in as a favorite to win, and I came in as an underdog. I was actually the underdog since the beginning, but somehow the underdog kept surviving the first, the second, the third, like all the way to the sixth round. And the one thing when it looked like it really could be something different was the moment when the Wall Street Journal made the exception. The Wall Street Journal never cared about the UN and the race of the Secretary-General, but this time they decided to take a position. So you can check it out. In 2016, in September, the Wall Street Journal took the editorial position. They ran an editorial saying we should support Vuk Jeremic to be Secretary General of the United Nations. So I came up with the endorsement of the Wall Street Journal. Now, it was Obama administration, and Obama administration wasn't at a terribly friendly terms with the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
If I could get if I could get the New York Times,
then it would have been better.
Editorial support, that would have been a little bit better, you
right.
know. But then who knows why it was good? Like God knows why happened, why things happened the way they happened. And although I was in a way heartbroken and disappointed that when you came to the final, it's so difficult to lose in the final. Sometimes it's easier to lose, in the quarterfinal than to lose in the final, early on.
Right.
So I was, of course, disappointed and heartbroken. But now with the benefit of hindsight, with everything that happened between 2016 and 2020, the way the world accelerated, the way the world became far more complex and complicated than it was back then. Who knows? Maybe it was for the better.
Well, I would argue that you still made an international impact. Everything that you've been doing through the CIRSD, you are bringing in through these Corona dialogues, through the Horizons magazine. You are still making an international impact through your channels, through all that hard work that you did, visiting 100 countries and as President of the UN General Assembly, and it's great. So you've still kind of done it. So can you want to tell maybe the Serbian American community more about the center and why you founded it and what you hope to achieve? Is that an extension of your work internationally?
Well, thank you for this question, and I'm very proud of the work of the Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development. And the reason why I founded it back in 2013, when I finished with my term as President of the General Assembly, was that I really wanted to do something to bring back to Serbia the debate on what is going on in the wider world, and to try and help rebuild the excellence in understanding global affairs that existed in Yugoslavia before the crisis started. Yep. Don't forget that Yugoslavia, the pre-war of the 90s Yugoslavia, was a very international player. As a leader of the non-aligned movement at that time, one could say that Yugoslavia was punching above its weight in international affairs. And part of the reason why Yugoslavia was capable of punching above its weight was that we had a system of education that built cadre that understood what was going on in Europe, what was going on in America, what was going on in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, throughout the world. After 2 decades of destruction, after 2 decades of inward looking, of trauma, of injustice, apathy, of terrible things that happened, everything, I realized that we unfortunately became very parochial as a society. You know, just looking into what's going on in our backyard, quarrels with our neighbors, and so on and so forth. We totally failed to grasp where the world was going, and the world was developing in very fast ways. And I realized that there was relatively poor understanding of what was going on in the world.
Right.
I wanted to create an internationally renowned and recognized think tank, a U.S. style think tank, and bring the debate on what is going on in the world to Serbia, so that the Serbian public can better understand, that Serbian students can educate themselves on this. And I asked a number of people who I worked with and became friends with throughout my career. Some of them were ministers of foreign affairs or leaders of their countries, and some of them were renowned academicians, like Jeffrey Sachs, for example, who was my mentor in graduate school. So I asked them, it wasn't myself only who created this think tank, with the help of former foreign minister of Spain, former prime minister of Pakistan, former foreign minister of Switzerland, former foreign minister of Indonesia, Secretary-General of the Organization of American States, Jose Miguel Insulza, and many others. We created a think tank that, you could have in Washington, D.C., like in a top place where think tanks are located. So we managed to create that level of quality of an institution, of a think tank institution in Serbia. And in the past 4 to 5 years, we had phenomenal guests, top-level guests in Serbia. We organized meetings all around the world, in London, in New York, in Beijing, in Paris. We set up a magazine that I think can compete with Foreign Affairs. Check it out on the web, and it also exists as a written copy, but there's also an online version of it. It's called Horizons, the Journal of International Relations and Sustainable Development, for which, we had some very, very interesting authors, because, if people like Christine Lagarde and Sergei Lavrov and Prime Minister of Turkey and President of Uruguay and several others decide to write for a Serbian newspaper, for a Serbian magazine for free, I think it gives you an indication that at least we're not doing everything wrong.
Absolutely.
In running it.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great segue kind of into, obviously, a few years ago, you formed the Narodna Stranka, or otherwise known as the People's Party. And I think, connecting that, when you decided to form the Narodna Stranka and you were creating the platform, did you have that in mind, this idea of Serbia as an international presence, as an international factor, as it used to be, from 40, even before, from, let's say, I would arguably say 1917 to 1990. Was that kind of the idea behind Narodna Stranka and the platform?
Well, I decided after I finished my race for Secretary General, I went back home, and I decided to live in Serbia. I decided to live in Serbia, and I decided to do my best to make an impact on where Serbia should go and how Serbia should be run. Because my opinion is that Serbia right now is not run in an optimal way. Although I'm now switching hats, and now I'm going to put the hat of the president of Narodna Stranka. Right. I'm trying not to be overly political. out of respect for the Serbian American Leadership Conference, which is a nonpartisan organization.
Thank you.
But I don't think it's a big secret that I'm very critical of the way that Serbia is run at the moment. And the way that Serbia currently positions itself with regard to the world is just one tiny aspect of what I believe is not done well in Serbia. I think that the biggest problem that we are currently facing in Serbia, I don't know, perhaps not the biggest, but one of the most crucial and fundamental problems is that Serbia is essentially no longer a democracy. I am deeply convinced that democracy is the best form of governance for Serbia. I'm not trying to claim that the type of democracy that I'd like to have in Serbia, which is similar to the types of democracies in Europe and in the United States, is the best solution for each and every country in the world. So, but for Serbia, I believe democracy is the best form of government. The democracy in Serbia right now is in jeopardy. And according to objective criteria that are being compiled and presented by organizations such as Freedom House, very famous U.S. think tank, and many others, Serbia has now been relegated to the group of what they call hybrid regimes. There is a consolidated democracy, there is an unconsolidated democracy, and then there is a hybrid regime level. Serbia is right now a hybrid regime. In Serbia, you don't have functioning of the democratic institutions according to our constitution, and there are serious issues when it comes to the rule of law and to fundamental freedoms. So Narodna Stranka, People's Party, I'm head of People's Party. It's a party of moderate right. We are center right. In Europe, it would be called center right. In America, we could be probably like moderate Republicans.
Right.
I don't know. This seems to be like a soon to be extinct species.
Right. I think so.
But,
I was going to say.
I mean, maybe we're not at the forefront of political modernity, but I don't know. Moderate Republicans would be what would be the closest relationship to the United States. In the European terms, it would be center right. What we believe in as a party is that Serbia needs to change so that it becomes much more like a modern European country. Austria, Sweden, Spain, and so on and so forth. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in certain traditional values that are, in our opinion, at the heart of a construction that is a successful nation. We believe in free market economy. We believe in fundamental human rights that are the achievement of modern Europe and the United States. We believe in private enterprise. We believe in what perhaps is not the most popular thing these days, because in many countries we have populists running the show.
Yeah.
But we're conservative, moderate. We're moderately conservative and pro rule of law.
I think that's great to hear, that the fact that these are 21st century principles, and the fact that the Narodna Stranka is supporting those principles, and you as the leader would like to implement them, means a lot. Obviously, economy is a big issue. You talked about the free markets. In terms of Narodna Stranka, if you were to become the majority party in the Serbian parliament, would you change the way business is done in Serbia? Would you change the way foreign investors are attracted to Serbia?
The most fundamental thing that you need to change in the Serbian economy is actually to introduce a strict rule of law. It's not directly an economic policy, but my belief is that 95% of a successful economic policy is to make sure that rules are known, that rules are applied, that rules are upheld, and that if somebody violates the rules, there is a reliable court system that can make sure that justice is served.
Absolutely. The contracts are enforced.
Absolutely. I think this is 95% of a successful economic model. And then 5%, the top 5%, the cherry on the pie, is whether you're going to have this tax system or if you're going to be applying these economic or those economic policies. But okay, let's say that the most important thing is the rule of law and the judiciary. That's what's going to be our priority. But let's talk about the last 5%. I personally believe that without a Serbian who live abroad, without Serbian diaspora, first, second, third generation diaspora, it'll be very, very difficult to move Serbia to the next level. It would have been very complicated even before the COVID-19 pandemic that made this great acceleration. Even before, it would have been, in my opinion, unimaginable without Serbs from abroad. And right now, I think it is absolutely essential. I'm going to choose my words very carefully. I'm not going to say a better half of Serbia, but certainly a more agile and potent half of Serbia right now lives outside the borders of the Republic of Serbia. You included, our brothers and sisters in many other countries included. You have great education. You have great resources, human resources. You have understanding and knowledge how these economies, which are far more successful than ours, work. I think that you represent an essential ingredient to the future success of our country. And especially given this great acceleration, this great quickening that we discussed already, where the move to the new technologies, the move to the new economy is not going to take 10 years. It's going to take a year or two.
Right.
Within 2 years, global supply chains are going to be severely disrupted. Many things that went online will never go back offline. So the new economy, and you, especially you guys in America, you are going to be at the forefront of this new economy. You are going to be learning probably faster than anybody as to the new ways and means of the global economy.
We've already seen the changes. Everything has gone mobile, online, work, classes, schools. I mean, anything you could, not even ordering delivery of foods and goods. It is almost strictly gone online, and I think you're very right about that. And what I really like to hear from you there is the fact that you're talking about the diaspora, and not only are you talking about the diaspora in a positive way. One of the rare aspects of the Narodna Stranka is the position that the party has adopted, that the Serbian people is one, unified, and indivisible, and that the Serbian state has the responsibility for the well-being of Serbs wherever they may live. And with that, you've actually created the first diaspora board in Chicago recently. So, that's, I respect that you are staying with, the positions that you've maintained, you are enacting them out in a certain way.
Yes, I think we are the very first Serbian political party that created a party branch in Chicago, which has in our party structure the same position as a branch in Čačak, for example, where I am right now. And for us in the Narodna Stranka, as you said, a Serb is a Serb is a Serb. And you may live in Chicago, or you may live in Banja Luka, or in Podgorica, or in Čačak, or in Novi Sad, or in Mitrovica, or anywhere in the world. I think that Serbian state has to treat all Serbs in the same way, so that they have equal rights and that the state equally protects them no matter where they live. So our state council in Chicago has the same voting right in the party, if you will, as the one in Subotica. And I'm perhaps biased because I was diaspora and more than once in my life. I returned to Serbia 3 times. I went abroad and I returned to Serbia. I went to Cambridge and then I returned. And then I went to Harvard and then returned. And then I went to the UN and returned. So I kept returning. I'm a big believer in a return to the country. But I understand it's not necessarily easy for everybody to go to Serbia, to go to Serbia for the first time if you're like a second generation, or to return to Serbia if you're a first generation. Because, you have a family, you have a job, not so easy. But what I would like to see in the future is that Serbia, through its legal system and through a set of policies aimed at diaspora, makes it natural and easy for diaspora to engage with Serbia.
Absolutely.
Economically, culturally, in every possible way. So, for example, you decide to move to Serbia. You don't have to move to Serbia forever. You decide that you want to spend 2 years or 3 years doing certain things in Serbia. You get certain tax incentive to do that. We make sure as a government, we're not in government, but like if one day if we are in the government, we're going to make sure that things are easy for you to move there for 2 to 3 years to come to Serbia. And then if you decide you want to stay, that's fantastic. If you decide you want to go back to America, again, that's going to be easy for you to move back to America. There are not going to be any bureaucratic burdens or tax deficiencies for you to do that. I'm a great believer in the potential of the diaspora and the need for us to build ourselves to build our country or rebuild our country using your knowledge, using your energy, using your patriotism, your love of your country and everything that you had learned from, the new online services that you just mentioned to everything else.
Right. Well, that's really great to hear here. And in the interest of time, you've already almost given us an hour. I just want to kind of give an opportunity to kind of hit on 2 topics. We had many more. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity in the future to discuss more. One of them is obviously as Serbian American Leadership Conference and being a diaspora organization, how would you like to, what is your vision for an organization like SALC? What are the things that you would like to see us do to help, the Serbia and the Serbian people? And how important are we to Serbia and the Serbian people?
Well, again, I'm subjective because I I was diaspora, and I'm a big believer in diaspora. A lot of people in Serbia are kind of, a little bit afraid of diaspora, thinking like, "Oh my God, it's very difficult to find a job now. Imagine what would happen if all of these guys come." I'm not in the bunch. I'm a very, very much pro diaspora, and I would love to see diaspora take a more, I would say, energetic engagement when it comes to political life. I would love to see diaspora vote in the Serbian elections. The current government is not in favor of that. And if if you want to vote in the Serbian election, you need to apply, and then you need to physically travel to the embassy or to the consulate in order to do that. I mean, the current system is such that it kind of it actually discourages you from voting. That's because the government believes that most of the people who live in the diaspora wouldn't support them, so they're discouraging the vote of the diaspora. I personally would change that. I'm in favor of diaspora. I would love to see diaspora be able to vote electronically, or at least
blockchain
by yes. But if that's like too much of a science fiction, let's even introduce like mail voting.
Yeah,
That's a start. Let's just like make sure that you can like mail your ballot and vote in the Serbian election. But your direct question was like for the SALC. I would love SALC to pay to spend more time working with Serbia, discussing political issues, not necessarily in terms of like left or right, but advocating for more democracy, advocating for more human rights. This is something that I believe SALC stands for, and maybe in that sense you could be more vocal. And the second thing is to try and help with this dissemination of new knowledge about the functioning of the economy, which we touched upon already.
Right.
So help us understand how the new services work. Help us understand how the new supply chains are going to work. You're in a much better position to internalize this, share it with Serbia. And then I have a vision of in this online world, in this work from home, remote services, remote work. I can easily imagine people sitting in Serbia and then working for American companies
Absolutely.
online.
The future.
I think this could be like a great link between US and Serbia, opening jobs in Serbia for people who would be able to do their jobs to do their things from Kragujevac and Novi Sad and Subotica for the companies that are, I don't know, in Chicago or Los Angeles,
Silicon Valley, right?
Or not. Silicon Valley, indeed.
Yeah. That's great to hear. We're at 1 hour, but I feel like I got to give you a chance here because this is a big issue in Serbia right now. President Vučić recently announced elections would be held on June 21st. You were actually on Utisak Nedelje last night. I caught bits and pieces of it. You had talked about the boycott a little bit, and surprisingly, actually, I got you had mentioned that you, if I understood correctly, you won't personally seek any public office. Did I hear that correctly? And if I did, what did you mean by that?
Well, it means that I spent 3 years fighting for a different kind of Serbia, and in Serbia there's not really free media that you have, and in Serbia they can write basically anything about you and demonize you to the point that it is very difficult to imagine for someone who lives in the United States. I was accused in the last 3 years of being a murderer. I was accused of being the leader of international mafia. I was, of course, American agent, because everybody who spent some time in America is being accused by this government of being an American agent, and so on and so forth. So I said, like, guys, if it's about me, if it's me that it is, unacceptable to run for a certain office. I was president of the UN. I almost became the Secretary-General. Maybe that is not good enough for Serbia, but okay, that's absolutely fine. If that's not good enough for Serbia, that is fine. I don't want to be anything for myself. I want to keep fighting so that the good people can become someone who are going to be holding high office in the future. You, other people from SALC, I want to fight for other people who are competent and who have not been as demonized as I was, and therefore make a burden on this idea of changing Serbia and transforming Serbia. I want to fight for them to be in office. I don't have to be anything. I don't need to be president. I don't need to be a foreign minister. I was that already. My only thing that I really will insist on is to see Serbia change. This way that Serbia is not good. This way that Serbia is draining our resources, is seeing us go through the biggest demographic crisis in history, including the world wars. So something's got to change. I want to fight for that change. And I don't want to fight for myself to become, president of something. I want to see Serbia change. That's what I said last night. And when it comes to the elections that are coming up on June 21, they're scheduled for June 21, but nobody knows if they're going to be really held in June 21. It also gives you a little bit of a picture of what kind of situation we have in Serbia, where you don't really know when the elections are going to be held in 6 weeks from now or not. I think they're a sham. There's absolutely no way to make your views known except through social medias. All the television stations, most media that have national coverage are absolutely shut for all critics of the government. And the government is not shying away from abusing all state resources in the campaign for office.
Right.
So under such circumstances, it's not really an election. It's like a race in which, you run against me like 100 yards, and I have 50 yards advance, and you have a ton of cement on your back, and there are 5 people who are making sure that you can't even start a race. So this is not really a free and fair election. If there's no free and fair election, let us not participate in this election. Let us not give legitimacy to that.
Right.
Because in order to get to free and fair conditions, we must make sure that they understand, that the government understands that this shall not pass. That they will never have the legitimacy if they don't change the conditions for the race. It'll take at least one time to boycott for them to understand that they'll have to change the conditions in order to have normalcy in Serbia.
Right.
Them and the international community as well. We gave the word to the people that we're not going to take part in the elections if the conditions are such. The conditions haven't changed. And the Narodna Stranka, the People's Party, we're going to keep our word. And we're not going to participate in the sham elections.
Regardless of a position on boycott or no boycott, I think it's admirable. That was actually what I read. You had actually said in the interview as well that you believed that it was time for a party to stick by its word, and whether or not the circumstances change, you're going to stick with the word. And I think, again, like I said, regardless of a position on the boycott, I think it's admirable. Mr. Jeremic, we've held you
Thank you so much
for even longer than we had hoped for. I'm very thankful that
and it's night. I hope that the people would be able to see me.
I think they can. But that's why we're kind of cutting close to the end here. I hope we have another opportunity to talk. I think this was great for our community to hear about
so much.
Who you are personally, hear about your work and all these other things. I wish you all the best. SALC, as you mentioned earlier, we're nonpartisan. We have interest with nobody. We want to help Serbia and the Serbian people, regardless of who that is. We can recognize good policies in one group and recognize good policies in another. And hopefully our ultimate goal is to improve the situation of Serbs. So again, Mr. Jeremic, thank you for your time. I want to thank everyone for watching today. This is a little bit extended viewing. I also want to remind everybody on May 23rd, this Saturday, we have a special Memorial Day interview with retired Texas Congressman and former co-chair of the Congressional Serbian Caucus, Judge Ted Pohl. Yes, that's right.
Ted Pohl, the judge. He's a great guy.
Absolutely. And Lieutenant Colonel John Capello, president of the Halyard Mission Foundation. And so it's going to be a great program on Saturday. We hope you can all tune in. Mr. Jeremic, to you and your family, we wish you all the best health and happiness.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All the best. God save you all. Bye-bye.